Hello, good morning. Welcome to Study the Word. This program is sponsored every week by the Kirkwood Church of Christ that meets at 948 South Geyer Road in Kirkwood. My name is Chuck Bartlett. I'm the minister for the church there, and we're glad you've joined us. In just a few moments, we're going to be dealing with another Bible question. Before we get into that, just want to remind you that if you have a Bible question on your mind, we'd love to hear from you. We love it when our viewers participate with this weekly program. And so if you'll call or email your question, we'll use it on this program. We hope you'll stay tuned. At the end of our program, we have a number of free Bible study helps that we offer to the community that a lot of people are taking advantage of. We're glad you joined us, so let's go ahead and get into our study. We have a lot to talk about. This is kind of similar, and we mention this from time to time, how that we get a lot of questions, and people haven't seen all our programs for the last 2.5 years. This kind of relates to a question that we had probably about a year ago when somebody inquired about should they have their baby baptized. And that's not the question, but it's going to kind of relate to it because what we're talking about today is born in sin. You see, we had one of our viewers who's taking the correspondence course wrote me and said, she really enjoyed the lesson, and she didn't realize that the Bible teaches that babies are not born in sin. See, this is one of the reasons why we encourage people to take the Bible course, because it gets them to open up their Bibles and learn things that they had been taught differently. And we're just trying to get people to go back to the Word. And so this is a plug for the correspondence course, of course. That, here's a person who was always taught that we're born in sin, and then she reads these scriptures. Now, you might not want to take the course, but I'll tell you what that course was dealing with, and we're going to talk a little bit about today in answering the question, are we born in sin? Does the Bible teach that? Okay, so we obviously know that back in the beginning, in the garden, there was a time when there was no sin in the world. Adam and Eve were innocent. That's why when you read the 3rd chapter, when they took the fruit that they were forbidden to eat, their eyes were opened and they saw that they were naked and they covered themselves. And they felt guilt. And so that's when they sinned, and then sin entered the world for the first time. Romans chapter 5 talks about that, and we'll probably go to that passage a little bit later. So we're not denying the fact that there was what we would call original sin, or the first sin. But people have gotten this idea that because of what Adam and Eve did in the garden, that's the reason we sin today. We have inherited that. We've inherited their guilt, they'll even say. Of course, that's just not right, because you have, for example, we'll go to the Old Testament, and then we'll go to the New Testament. But back in Ezekiel, the 18th chapter, it tells us in verse 20, the soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. And so obviously, if your parent did something that was wrong, that doesn't mean that you're guilty. Now, I didn't say that if your parent did something wrong that you wouldn't suffer some way. You can suffer consequences. That happens all the time at the workplace. You might be innocent and suffer because of what somebody else did. It happens all the time. But we're talking about guilt here. Now, obviously, Adam and Eve sinned, and they were put out of the garden. And if you want to know why you grow old and die, is because you do not have access to the tree of life, which is what happened with Adam and Eve. They were put out of the garden and no longer had access to the tree of life. But as far as guilt is concerned, Cain and Abel did not inherit the guilt of Adam or Eve, as far as that goes, as we just read here. There's no guilt. And so if my father robbed a bank, obviously I'm not guilty of something that he did. If I did something wrong, he's not guilty. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't suffer some consequences. And that's sometimes what gets confusing here, or gets people thinking the wrong way, because they're thinking consequences are on par with guilt, and they're not. And so as we move over to the New Testament, we're going to go to that Romans chapter 5 passage, because it talks about what Adam did in the garden, and talks about the fact that sin entered the world through one man. Now, what we're going to try to figure out is that if sin entered the world through one man, are we just automatically, unconditionally sinners? Are we born sinners? Okay, born in sin. And keep that in mind, because we're going to talk about the definition of sin in just a few moments. But over here in Romans chapter 5, it's important to read verse 12, where it says, "Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world," you know, he's talking about Adam, "and death through sin, thus death spread to all men." Now, you got to read the last few words here. It says, "because all sinned." Sin, by definition, 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4, sin means transgression of law. That's the definition of it. You cannot inherit an action. You can inherit some consequence, but you're not going to inherit an action. My dad, if he robbed a bank, I did not rob a bank. I did not break a law. He broke the law. Now, if he's put in prison, I don't have a dad around, then obviously I'm suffering some consequences. And we grant that point. But you must see that there's no guilt upon me. And that's what he's saying here. Because we've all sinned, we know that, Romans 3:23, we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. Don't question that. Now, really, what happens here is people want to know, well, why, Chuck? Why does everybody sin? Isn't it because of Adam and Eve? Shouldn't we blame them? Well, no, you would not blame them. Why not? Well, who are Adam and Eve going to blame? Who are they going to blame? You know, in the garden, they wanted to play the blame game. You read there in the 3rd chapter that, you know, who told you were naked? And they tried to hide themselves from God. And of course, so Adam says, well, Eve gave it to me. He's blaming her. And then Eve goes, well, the serpent deceived me. And now he's blaming the serpent. Or she is. So everybody always wants to play the blame game. That continues on even to this day, where people want to blame somebody else. So we want to explain this. So people say, well, Chuck, how do you explain the fact that everybody sins? Well, I explain that, or rather, the Bible explains that in answering how Adam and Eve sinned, because Adam and Eve were not created in sin either. They were not born in sin. When God made them, you read in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26, he created man, and what he made, it was good. There was nothing there. They were as pure and innocent as can be. It wasn't until they transgressed. So to answer the question, why does everybody sin? More specifically, why did Adam and Eve sin? The answer is given to us in James, the 1st chapter. And this applies to each and every one of us. So James chapter 1 says in verse 13, let no one say when he's tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire hath conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Now let me make a side point here, because it's talking about here that sin comes about when you are tempted and you give in to the temptation. Okay? The side point I want to make quickly, and then we'll get back on track, is found over in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and in verse 13. Again, talking about temptation. Here's what Paul said. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make a way that they may escape, that you may be able to bear it. So we're learning how sin comes about, and that's when people are tempted. Eve was tempted. The serpent got her to look at it, and she was tempted to take the fruit. Adam, everybody after that, they're tempted by different things. 1 John gives us the general category of all the things that you and I are tempted with. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, he talks about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. Every transgression you could possibly think of comes under one of those three categories. And so we all face temptation. Now the key thing here is we can't say, well, I had to sin because Adam sinned. I had to sin. No, because it says God will not allow you to be tempted beyond that you are able. People have asked me, why did God allow the serpent to go in to the garden to tempt Eve? Well, keep in mind, God is a just God, and what he said in 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 13 would apply for Adam and Eve. They didn't have to give in to the temptation because God will not allow any of us to be tempted beyond our ability to bear it or escape it. We can't say the devil made me do it. Now, the devil can tempt us, of course, but that doesn't make us sin. So we can never tell God, oh, I had to sin. Nobody has to sin. And some people can make it very hard for you. Somebody could be tempting to hurt my wife and say, if you don't deny God, I'm going to hurt her. And that would be a strong temptation, would it not? Of course. But the person can't make me say things, do things. And that's what I want us to see here. So getting back to our question, if you just tuned in, people are being taught all over this world that we're born in sin, and the reason we sin is because of Adam and Eve. Well, we've been just talking about temptation, and that's what, that's why Adam and Eve gave into sin. And we have to answer that. I ask that question all the time to people. Why did Adam and Eve sin? If we're born in sin, and that's the reason why we sin, well, then why did they? And they might say, well, they were tempted. Well, that's right. And that's what James chapter 1 tells us. We are too. See, when you understand sin brings forth death, that means there's accountability. So every sin has consequences. Every sin has consequences. And that would be Romans 6 and verse 23, for the wages of sin is death. What do you get from sinning? You get death. The wages of sin is death. And so if you and I suffer consequences for every transgression we make, there's not a sin out there that we're allowed to commit. So if there's accountability for every transgression, and if God is going to punish us for something we had to do, then that makes God unjust. No, we are being punished because we are the ones that made the choice to give in to sin. Now, let's go a little bit further in Romans chapter 5, because people think that in some ways Romans chapter 5 proves you're born in sin. And the passage that they like to bring up is found in verse 18 they like to read. Well, I like to read the whole context, but look what it says here in verse 18 and 19 of Romans chapter 5. It says, therefore, as through one man's offense, judgment came to all men, resulting in condemnation, even so through one man's righteous act, the free gift came to men, resulting in justification of life. Now notice verse 19. For as by one man's disobedience, many were made sinners. Who's the one man? Adam. Okay. One man's disobedience, many were made sinners. There they go. There you go. We're made sinners because of this one man's disobedience. Well, let's just stop reading. We don't need to stop reading. Let's read the second half of the verse. It says, so also by one man's obedience, many will be made righteous. Well, who's he talking about there? He's talking about Jesus. So by one man's obedience, we will be made righteous. By one man's disobedience, We are made sinners. So this begs the question, are we made sinners unconditionally? And so, yep, unconditionally. You're born in sin, Chuck, because it said you're made sinners. So, wait a minute. Didn't it also say by one man's obedience, that would be Jesus, we're going to be made righteous? So that means that's unconditional too? Well, no, that's conditional upon you obeying. Oh, I see. So the made in the second half of the verse is conditional, but the first made, made sinners, that's unconditional? No, it doesn't even make any sense. See, there's where the abuse of scriptures come in. So what we're noticing here is that the reason why a person is made a sinner is because they've given into sin. Sin, by definition, is transgression of law. Now, here's something else I really want us to think about. It's pretty powerful. I find it rather interesting, and I came out of a religious group that taught this, by the way, and I realized it was false doctrine. But I find it rather interesting that even the religious group that I came out of, and many of these denominations that are out there who teach you're born in sin, you know what they also teach? They teach redemption. Redemption of Jesus Christ. And now you might be sitting there saying, so Chuck, that's okay. They teach you're born in sin, and they teach we're redeemed by the blood of Christ. Isn't that what it says over there in Ephesians chapter 1? Well, let's go over there and take a look at this, because I want us to think about this concept of redemption here as we're talking about this subject. It says in verse 7, in him, in Jesus, we have redemption through his blood. We're redeemed by the blood of Christ. We sing about it, and those religious groups will even sing that song, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. But here's my question. If they're teaching you're born in sin, they can't teach redemption. Well, why can't they teach redemption, Chuck? Well, see, because the word redeemed means to be brought back, bought back. The purchase price of blood, of course, the blood of Christ, but brought back. Well, that begs the question. Come back from where? See, if I told you, man, I'm just tired, I just got back from Australia, and you said, well, what was it like in Australia? And I said, I don't know, I've never been there. You'd say, well, you just said you got back from there. You can't say you've come back from a place you've never been. True. So when somebody says, I've been redeemed by the blood, well, wait a minute. When were you ever right with the Lord? Because it says you've been brought back. When were you ever right? When you were young, when you were a child. Like Paul talked about, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I know he was talking about spiritual gifts, but he makes the point. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I acted like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. So we understand that when you bring this newborn baby into your home, and it's brought into this world, what sin has that child committed? They say, well, they've inherited Adam's sin. Well, you can't inherit an action. We already read in Ezekiel 18, the son shall not bear the iniquity of the father. And so this child is pure and it's innocent. And as it grew older, just like Adam and Eve were in the garden for a period of time, it says how long they were in the garden before she took the fruit and Adam ate the fruit, but they're there for a period of time. They were in the state of innocence. So are children. They're innocent. And as they grow older and they mature and they understand the concepts of right and wrong and they transgress, guess what? They need to be redeemed by the blood of Christ. They need to be brought back. And so this is why, of course, we dealt with a while back the concept of, or the fallacy of the concept that there should be infant baptism. Why would you baptize an infant? Now, a lot of that has to do with dedication. They'll say we're dedicated. Well, it's not found in the Bible. But some think it's connected with the idea of original sin. I'm thinking, wait a second, they're innocent. And if you learn anything about baptism in the New Testament, you're clearly told that you must believe who Jesus is, and you must repent, and then be baptized. And you rise up in newness of sin, putting off that old man of sin, as Romans 6 deals with. Well, that child can't believe. That infant can't confess their faith in Jesus. And so to be baptized, or to baptize a child is just, it's not in the Bible to begin with. There's no verses. Remember, this is why we keep pushing that tract that we give to people free, of the list of those 40 things that people say are in the Bible that are not. And that's one of them, by the way. We're covering one of them today. People who say babies are born in sin, we're saying, where in the Bible does it teach that? Now, a passage that people like to go to is Psalm 51. I'm not afraid to go over it. I'm not afraid to talk about any passage of Scripture. Now, when I'm talking with somebody about being born in sin, and they want to bring up Psalm 51, which I'm glad to look at, but I'm asking them, did you want to look at Ezekiel 18? Did you want to look at Romans chapter 5? I mean, did you want to look at these, 1 John chapter 3, James chapter 1, 1 Corinthians chapter 10? Did you want to look at those verses too? You see, it's easy just to go to the verses they think teaches what it does, but you need to take on all of the verses. So I'm not afraid to talk about Psalm 51, and I'm not afraid to talk about all these other verses too. See what the Bible has to say about it. Now in Psalm 51, I know what they want it to say, and the Bible doesn't say this. This whole text is dealing with how the psalmist felt so bad for his transgression. Start in verse 1. They love verse 5. But look at verse 1. He's saying, have mercy on me, O God, according to your loving kindness. According to the multitude of your tender mercies, blot out my what? My transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. Cleanse me from my sin. You can almost see the psalmist talking about the sin with Bathsheba. He just feels filthy and dirty, and he just wants forgiveness. He says, for I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. My sin, my transgression is ever before me. Against you, you only have I sinned. My Father, I have sinned, and done this evil in your sight, that you may be found just when you speak, and blameless when you judge. Now I'm going to read verse 5, but people want to just take verse 5 and pluck it out of its context and say, see, here it's talking about being born in sin. Look at it in its context, how he's feeling. Look what he says in verse 5. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden parts you will make me to know wisdom. So it says there, so I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. So, see, born in sin. Didn't say that. That verse does not say you're born in sin. You know, if a lady says, in drunkenness, my husband beat me. Who is drunk? In sin, my mother conceived me. Who had the sin? Now, it could be related to the whole concept of the sinful world that is there, but not his transgression. He was identifying his transgression. The whole concept that there's just sin all around, which we don't deny. People say, why does everybody sin, Chuck? Well, I'm telling you, look, Adam and Eve sinned under the best of conditions. We sin under the worst. A lot more temptations now that are around. It's everywhere. TV, billboards, magazine, you name it, internet. Folks, we just need to stay with the scriptures. I look at the clock, I can't tell. I can't believe time has flown by today. So I love this program. Time passes quickly when you're enjoying what you're doing. We hope you've enjoyed our study today. If you have any other questions that relate to this, we're glad to send you some more material. We have a pamphlet on Are You Born in Sin? And we can mail that to you. But folks, we want to encourage you. It's like the lady who learned about this concept of children and they're born in their innocence from the Bible studies, lesson number 2. There's only 6 lessons in that short Bible course. We'd love to send it to you, send you that first lesson, no charge. We put a self-addressed stamp in there, make it easy for you. Work at it at your own speed. And call or text your address. We'll get it in the mail first thing tomorrow. Great thing to add to your knowledge. All you need is a Bible. If you don't have one of those, let us know. Also, I mentioned earlier about those pamphlets. 40 things people think are found in the Bible that are not. 30 things that are in the Bible that people say that are not in the Bible. We can put those in with your first lesson if you'd like that. We can put you on the mailing list for the weekly bulletin. It's just 2 articles, kind of like this program. We just see what the Bible has to say about certain subjects and get you to look at the scriptures, like those in Acts 17:11. Searching the scriptures is what we want people to do. Be followers of the Lord, not some organization. Not trying to convert you to the Kirkwood Church of Christ. And the Church of Christ are the people. The church means the people, the called out. So we're not trying to convert you to the people. We're going to convert you to Christ. Be a follower of His. And would love to sit down and have a face-to-face Bible study with you. You might say, Chuck, where would we begin? Where would we begin if we set up a Bible study? Well, one of the things I tell people is, you know what? I have a series of lessons that we go through. The first 3 lessons that are about 40 minutes each, all classes about 40 minutes. But the series of studies I have, the first 3, I say, I can teach you the whole Bible in 3 lessons. You get a big picture of the Bible, which helps you in understanding and in rightly dividing the Bible. And then we go from there and we study some other things. But if that's of interest to you, call some friends. More the merrier. Gather around the kitchen table. Be in the dining room, wherever you want to meet. Meet at the church building, meet at your home or a coffee shop. We can sit around and we can study the scriptures. Why? Because we want you to go to heaven. And I'm sure you have that desire. You just want to do what's right. Don't let pride get in the way. You know, if we have that desire, we should be willing to search the scriptures, examine ourselves, whether we're in the faith or not. We want to be honest with ourselves. Because let's face it, when you have the truth and you're doing it, you have that which to share with other people. You don't want to lead people astray. You don't want to believe a lie either. And that's why Jesus had to warn in Matthew 15 and verse 14, if the blind lead the blind, both fall in the ditch. And folks, it's happening all the time. People are not questioning their religious leaders. They're just believing what they have to say. And they're too afraid to go up and say, excuse me, where's that found in the Bible? They don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. Folks, we're talking about your soul. Jesus said, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Folks, we don't want you to lose your soul. We want to help you. We want to help you study the Word. We want to help you get to heaven. If we can be a help to you in any way, please let us know. We hope you'll be a regular viewer of this program. Tell your friends and family about this. You tune in next week. We're going to look at another Bible question that has come our way. And you know what we're going to do together. We will study the Word. Thank you, folks, and have yourselves a great day.